We've finished making our basic case for Christian nonviolence, so now it's time to get into some rebuttals. We'll start with two rebuttals: Jesus and the Moneychangers, and John and the Centurion. Jesus and the Moneychangers can be found in Matthew 21, Mark 11, Luke 19, and John 2. And this is the famous passage where Jesus flips over tables and seems to go in with a whip and start whipping everybody. Whips don't seem too nonviolent. But the account in John 2 helps us to see that there's actually a lot we assume into this reading of Scripture. That's because John specifically tells us what Jesus used the whip for. He used it to drive out the sheep and the cattle. Violence and righteous anger seem like two very different things, especially if Jesus didn't let the sun go down on his anger, and especially if Jesus didn't turn his anger into hatred or violence. Matthew and Luke also follow up this passage with the religious leaders looking for an opportunity to kill Jesus. Now, I want you to think about that a little bit. There were Roman guards stationed all around the temple because of how volatile it was. If there was any chance that Jesus was causing an insurrection or an uprising, they would be all over that. What do you mean the Pharisees were looking for a way to accuse Jesus of something? If what Jesus did was to go around beating the religious leaders and to cause havoc in the temple, then right there is their opportunity to seize him and do something about it. Rome would have been all on that. So obviously there's a lot more to that story, and there's more going on than we really realize, and there's a lot that we read into this. Now let's talk about John and the Centurions. In Luke 3, we see a centurion come to John and say, "Hey, what should I do?" And John gives him some specific instructions, one of which is not to stop being a centurion. New Testament is against doing violence. It seems like John would have told this guy to stop the job that involves killing people. John does tell him to not extort people and to be content with his pay. And in some versions it says, don't do violence or something to that extent. So what we have here is, number one, an argument from silence. Just because John doesn't tell him to stop being a centurion doesn't mean that this guy was justified in all of the things that he did, which as a centurion would also include God worship. John didn't tell him to stop worshiping gods. Second, this overlooks all of the other times that Jesus' followers just didn't have omniscience about his purposes, right? John asked, "Are you truly the Messiah?" Peter said, "I won't allow you to suffer, Jesus." And in the post-resurrection, they're still asking, "Jesus, when are you going to bring the political kingdom?" Would I be surprised that John didn't get the whole picture at this point? Finally, the early church illuminates this by showing us that soldiers could stay in the army so long as they did no violence.